Hello, folks who are here already. Just a few people here, and I suppose we'll give other folks who might be attending just a couple minutes to find the link or log in. Those of you who are attending, however, there's few enough of us here that if you'd like to talk, please put that in the Q&A box. And let's see, as just a few more people are joining here just at the beginning, I'll remind those of you who may have been here before and inform those of you who are new. Let's see if I share my screen. I'll share my screen just for the sake of showing. Excellent. Oh, I can't show what I wanted to show. I want to show you the Q&A box. So there's a Q&A box on your Zoom screen, and if you click that Q&A, you're able to type in questions there. That is the best and easiest way to share your questions. However, if you'd like to speak, please help me out. Join at least with your voice to say your question out loud. You can put that you're willing to and able to ask your question with your own voice in that Q&A box, and I can allow you to talk for your question. So with that, we have 10 folks here. So again, if you got a question, you can put it in the Q&A box. And if you are interested in speaking, you can either put that in the Q&A box or you can raise your hand virtually, which means you click raise hand on your little Q&A box. So with that, Holly's here. Holly, chat me if you'd like me to make you a panelist. And as I look through all the folks here, hello Ting, hello Laura and Kristen. I'll promote Holly. Bella's here. I'll make Holly a panelist. Now becoming a running summer event for us, me and Holly. Hello, Heather and Emily. Hello, Cynthia. Hi, Holly. Alyssa Woods, and hello, Andrew. Okay, so smaller group than we've had before, which means if you'd like to, folks, raise your hand or chat in and join us in a conversation so that you can ask a question. Say, Holly, have you heard any questions this past week? Oh, nice, I'm seeing you type.
Some questions. Has anyone in this group given any questions yet?
Not quite. Oh, Alyssa Woods asks, kids, yes, this is a forum, just to clarify for everyone's here, for parents and students. Holly and I will be an all ages event tonight. We will be framing all answers appropriately for all students to watch too. And so students, if you're watching, I don't know exactly who might be watching, but say, Madigan, if you have a question, please ask it, and then we can give you all the information that we can for now. So Holly, have you heard anything from families or parents lately that you think we should talk about first?
I haven't heard anything, but the last couple of meetings, there were lots of questions. Maybe I could pull one of those back up.
Yeah, I think we could, and I don't see any Q&A questions yet, but just a couple folks have joined in the last few minutes, and so if you do have a question, throw it in the Q&A, and I can do a little intro because sometimes folks watch these recorded. So for those of you who have been watching at home, these already, you may see information here you've seen before. So Holly, can you see the great graph that the Department of Education released? Okay, wonderful. So here's the summary of what we've learned in the past week, is that it's right now, Tuesday, August 4th, and it was last week on July 30th that the Department of Education and the Governor and the Commissioner of Education all made an announcement, and specifically, they said that every local school district, and we are our own district, will be making some decisions based on preparedness, our mitigation and our ability to implement mitigation strategies, and then safety. in order to follow this model, basically, which is in our county or the counties where we serve students, based on increasing or decreasing viral activity, and also then based on increasing school preparedness and capacity to implement mitigation and prepare a safe environment for our students. This is what the state has officially recommended, is that sort of the more prepared we are and the less viral activity there is in our counties that we serve students, we will move more toward in-person learning. And then stepping back from there, a hybrid model would be used if we have very stable, say, viral activity that's not raising, but does recommend that a mitigation strategy would be to have less concentrated groups of students. And then either in our preparedness or in increased viral activity, we would want to use distance learning to assure that we have the most secure learning environment for kids. And so a lot of what I'll be talking about tonight is really based around that, working with managers and some staff at Great River School, and we're looking at all the survey results we've taken in. We know that many other school districts have already announced their plans for the fall, and we will likely be communicating our plans within a week of today in terms of how we'll start the year. However, I just want to mention, and I want to emphasize, it's a complex process in which we're not going to announce one thing for the year and then be there. And so we're working on a timeline of expected review and expected notifications so that you know how or if the school year may change as we go. And so then I'll just remind folks too, and I do see we got one question. We have one question, which is great. I'll just remind folks that specifically you can look into county reports for your county. And what we're basing our numbers on is the total number of cases in the last 14 days. And then you take that county population divided by 10,000, use that as a denominator for your total number of cases, and that gives us a case count. And so as of last week, for instance, these are the 7 metro counties closest to our school. We even have a couple students from counties farther away than these. However, you can see the range of numbers here between the teens and very low 20s. Based on those numbers, however, these are the case count recommendations. And so you see we're in the either high second tier or low third tier, which would recommend a different model for students. And so we are taking this into account, but I will remind folks that it isn't just a formula that we follow. So we don't just take, at this point, the recommendation from the Department of Health is you take the county where you serve students that is the highest number and you would base your model on that. So if it was just a formula, we would know exactly what we were doing. However, again, I'll remind you of that graph that based on viral activity is one part of the graph, and then our preparedness to implement mitigation is another part. And so teaching students and orienting students as to what's expected about not only hand washing, but moving around the learning environment, wearing masks all day, how to assert yourself or stand up for making sure that other people are respecting your space. We're all preparing ways that we can instruct students to do that in ways that really support social emotional stability as much as possible, and really prepare students to be able to learn in the learning environment. And so as a Montessori school, we know that the learning environment is the primary foundation as to whether or not students succeed, and we want to make sure that we're really prepared. So I did mention last Thursday night that don't just take these numbers and think that you know what we're going to do. Based on the numbers right now, we would take the highest number of these counties plus the 2 others where we have students currently enrolled, and we would use that as a starting point. So another tip is don't just because we are located in Ramsey County think that the Ramsey County number determines our model. And so I know many school districts, St. Paul Public Schools and Minneapolis Public Schools included, have already declared a very conservative start to the year with mostly distance learning. And I did say last Thursday, and we'll emphasize again to our families, be prepared for that. We will work with you, but be prepared for that in terms of hearing it and your expectations for how we start the year. And so with that, I will stop my screen share. And Holly, I think we have a question. You want to be the question answerer?
Yeah.
I mean, which one?
Yes, please, yeah. I'll ask the question. We have 1 in Q&A and 3 in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Here we go.
So the question is from Andrew, and it says, if St. Paul Public starts with online only, are we or you beholden to that? Would you or we be strongly influenced by such a decision?
Oh, Andrew, thank you for asking. And this is where I will say a couple things. One, I do believe St. Paul Public Schools has actually at least tweeted and social media posted that they will be beginning the year in online format, so in distance learning. And so you can check up on St. Paul Public Schools and see exactly what they've said. I will say that doesn't mean that that's exactly how we'll start the year. However, one of the things that we are taking into account is what are other families having to deal with in terms of, say, days for childcare. And so if St. Paul Public Schools has declared, for instance, that they were in hybrid learning, that would probably more heavily affect how we plan, say, our hybrid days. And so we are working on finalizing that. However, honestly, our community decision has to be based on all the counties where our students are. And so knowing that St. Paul Public Schools declared that they'll start the year into online learning, I suppose I, as a school in St. Paul community member, had to consider, well, when is St. Paul going to review that decision? How much notice would I get as a family if I were sending my kids to those schools as to if that would change or not? And then how will they be deciding, throughout the year, how to measure those mitigation and implementation strategies? And so what I have been strongly influenced to do is make sure that our answers have a little more detail, though I know everyone wants some kind of clarity just to at least know what to start with this year. So I guess you got your answer in that they've announced last week what they're doing, and I received no fewer than a dozen phone calls from teachers about, are we doing that too? And I let them know we're going to still follow our process of assessing, and likely it will be later this week that we'll say how we're starting. But the big district, St. Paul and Minneapolis, and also I would say the Roseville decisions, because the majority of our families live in one of those communities and they have siblings at those schools. The majority of what I'm doing in terms of planning around big district decisions is to make sure that we have answers for families for whom, say, our hybrid model doesn't match up exactly with the other big district hybrid models. So we'll see. I am a little surprised that so many schools have declared how they're starting, even though we have a month to go and a month of health data too.
So Sam,
okay,
Jessica,
well, another.
You kind of answered this already, but Jessica says, thanks for being here again. As the caseloads go up and down in the counties, will there be monthly decisions or weekly, where we get a week's notice to change the mode of education?
Oh, sure. And at future evenings, I will have a nice little drawing whiteboard where I can make diagrams. One of my former students from 10 years ago mentioned that I should draw while I'm talking. That would make these better. So Jessica, thank you for your question. I will say this, to pull up, say, the graph that I had referred to earlier. Can you see that, Holly? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. To pull up this graph, Jessica, we would go, say, from the in-person back to distance learning very quickly. In particular, if we were in an in-person model and we heard from the Department of Health, or we had a number of cases reported positive in our community or in our building at the same time, we would go very quickly from in-person to a more conservative model. So specifically, we would go from in-person to distance learning. In that case, the Department of Health guidance and Education Minnesota, or Department of Education guidance, is that we would be prepared to do that within 12 hours. So just know when I talk about the timelines here, we can always go from whatever model we're in, hybrid or in person, back to distance learning this coming year, based on health recommendations and based on the need for contact tracing within 12 hours. So that means basically next day, or even if we find out right after school that something has changed, the very next day. So we wouldn't shut down a school the same day and send kids home, though we do have strategies from the Department of Health on how to contain positive students on site and then get out of campus in a way that's orderly. So I don't want to alarm anyone, but I just want to let you know that basically we have some drills prepared to go from in-person to distance learning very quickly. So then the second part of your question, I think, is for, how often would you hear, and then how would we let you know? And so we're still working out some of the finer point details on this, but my current best information and inclination is to let you know that when we do declare how we'll start the year, we'll give you at least a set time period of somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks that will stay in that model consistently. And that's what's going to give us the best opportunity to engage with students and families and staff in how to best implement the strategies we're using in that model to go through the year. So that's one. Two would be every 4 weeks we'll be assessing county health data. So whatever we announce now, we're not likely to change it as the year begins unless something drastic changes with county health data, which is one of the reasons we're more likely to start the year conservatively rather than more in person. So just to give you a heads up on that. But when we do assess that data every 4 weeks, what we'll then be doing is giving likely 2 weeks notice for when the model change would be. And so we're looking at laying a calendar out that gives basically every 3 to 6 weeks some points at which you know you're going to get communication about what we're seeing going forward. What I'd like to see is that counties throughout the metro area get very similar stable numbers, that the numbers are not going up in terms of looking at a chart of case growth or positive test growth, and that the case count in each county stays stable for 2 2-week periods in a row, so that we really know that we think we have a good handle on where things are. And when we see that comparing the 2-week data in a row, and for instance, I will show you, the Department of Education releases this for public view. And if you really know your way around the Department of Health website, you can see this data sort of live. But they release this data again every 2 weeks. So the most recent data available when they made their announcement last week was the 7/5 through 18 dates. So even these 2-week data sets are delayed by another week to week and a half. But you would find your county, then you would look at your number. And what we want to see, you know, for instance, we do have students who live in Anoka County. We would want to look at these numbers, and you see for May through June, the numbers went down slightly, up slightly again, up slightly again, and then up at a greater number. We don't like to see that. And so that would inform us that we really want to make sure that we're not part of a climbing number. We would want to see the numbers either stabilize, stay near the same number. Like if you look at Becker County, you know, Becker County basically through the July 4th weekend was in a state at which if we saw these numbers, then we would decide to move, say, more in person to like the next model forward. And we would give you, again, I think, 1 to 2 weeks notice at least. And then what we are going to do is, you know, basically give a preview of which students would be in which group for a hybrid model, also what it would look like for an in-person model. And then we'll be wanting you, this is a question asked last week a couple times, we will want you then to commit to one of those models for that 3 to 6 week period. And so those numbers that I've been throwing out, those will be finalized in the next couple weeks as we work with our community feedback groups. And those are the kind of really specific details that we'll be able to give you by August 15th. But even with something like hybrid, if we're going to start the year that way, then we'll be looking to give you what group your students in even before then. So I'll stop my screen share now. Did I get that whole question, Holly? What do you think?
You did. There are more questions.
Oh, great,
in the
great.
Q&A and some in the chat from me. But I do remember a question I had from a mom saying in an email saying that I know Sam told us he was leaving, but he's still here. What's up? I'm glad you're still here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Right. Well, I couldn't catch a cab. No, folks, that's not true at all. That's off the cuff, and I apologize for my disregard. It's true. I did announce that I would be done as a head of school in June 2020. As you may have noticed, some unexpected things happened between March and June 2020. So in April 2020, the search committee that was looking for a new head of school informed the school board that they were going to pause and suspend the search until the pandemic effect on schools had passed. That was something folks were still talking about in April 2020, as if it was going to pass sooner than later. And so the search committee asked that the executive committee of our school board assess whether or not or how I could stay in order to make sure that we had a stable operational plan. So I worked with the school board in April and May. The really defining factor in me moving away from Great River School in terms of my role as head of school is that my family has moved to where my spouse and children are from, which is very far northern Minnesota. So the 55723 zip code is my mailing address. I have commuted to school even last year on school days a few times, and it's not something that I'll be doing a lot. But in particular, as the year starts, for instance, I will be on site when staff training happens. I'll likely be on site regardless of if we're a distance learning model or not, for partial weeks through the school year. And in particular, what I am making sure we do is keep the stable organizational model and plan. And so just to give you even more detail, that means that I've worked with the school board to establish that when we can predict how we can interview people, how we can have the community engage with new candidates, and ideally, when we can gather people physically in a space to meet candidates to be a school leader, that's when we will start looking at an end date for me. But I also then now can take on a role of making sure that that process is ready to go, and that our school board and school compliance plans really can incorporate all the things that we have to make up for. So from key experiences to how our food program works to, students aged 6 to 18, this is not a typical job. And so it's not something that anyone else was just going to step into and, frankly, have any idea how to start understanding. However, because I am more distant from campus, I did engage with some expert trained, Montessori trained and expert school administrators, and did hire someone to be on site at all times, both to support the managers of the teams and to make sure that in this year, again, where there's so much compliance on site for safety, and frankly, it's not like the work of our school slowed down. So there's also a lot of long-term planning and a lot of financial and legal compliance paperwork that I'm responsible for. So that person's name is Wendy Fisher. And Wendy is really just an excellent and, in my experience, unmatched experienced person at preparing a learning environment to work in the same kind of model that we run, both for elementary students, adolescent students, and adults. And so as one of the few people I've ever met who subbed at Great River School over the course of several weeks this winter, and is Montessori trained, and didn't have any missteps, frankly, in trying to understand why we were doing what we were doing or how we were doing it, but also offered some insight as to how we can improve and get a little more, I think, orderly and organized in our management. Wendy is a real asset. So I'm still around. I brought on another person to help manage the on-site things, and then I'll be around until the school board figures out a solid way to be able to move forward. And we'll see. My hope would be that this pandemic response our state is having becomes very successful, and then we all get comfortable in mitigated ways to gather with each other, and then we can do that. So then I can tell you, all about the outdoor education program I want to run for students up here, but that won't happen until we're done with this thing. So in any case, okay, other questions? Anyone else? Yeah, that's probably more detail than you wanted. I'm sticking around. There's no end date yet, and when there is, we'll let you know. I don't fault anyone for not catching the email announcement back in May. It was mid-May, right before our fundraiser. A lot has happened in our country and our world since then that frankly is more important than what my professional plans are. So, okay.
So here
What's
is
next, Holly? What do we think?
a question from
Yeah.
Alyssa Woods. If we begin the year in distance learning format, will it be similar to last spring's distance learning experience?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that question. And give me one moment. I know you can't see what I'm doing. This is ridiculous. When I ask you to give me a moment, and it just looks like I'm doing exactly what I was doing before. So what I will show you is some data that we are using. I'll share my screen again. The things, here's something. I hope this doesn't sound too much like a sales pitch, Alyssa. The things that worked, we will keep doing those things. And the places where we struggled or students weren't engaged as we would like to see, we will change those things. So specifically, back 2 weeks ago, we asked families a lot of questions about what worked and what could go better. And so I'll just give you a little preview. Holly, can you see that, or is it kind of too small?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. So we asked families if we have to learn from home, i.e. distance learning this year. We wanted you to finish the sentence. Here's what we need from Great River to make distance learning successful. And so of all the respondents, you can see some of the leading responses were the daily one-on-one check-in with an adult at Great River, structured and supervised independent work time. So independent work is an essential part of why students are successful over the years at Great River School and what our graduates identify as frankly, the defining characteristic of what they see they brought into the world that made them prepared was how they used independent work and learned from both when it went well and when it wasn't going well. So they learned those lessons through independent work. And what we're seeing, though, is a request for structured and supervised independent work, as well as more specifically scheduled activities for their student than was in the spring. So likely that would look like set times to report back on your learning or your research or demonstrate what you've engaged with. A more direct way to reach out to teachers. And I guess I would say that these two, this number 72 and 95, are the number of people who identified these two items, but I tie these two pretty closely together. So if you'll see what I'm sharing on my screen, the way to reach out to teachers more directly and a single streamlined online platform, i.e. not Google Classroom and PowerSchool, but one system. I see those two as being very closely tied together, and we're working on a solution to that I think we'll be ready to implement well before the school year begins, but would allow a student, say, in elementary or in junior high, not to have to go through their email portal to log into one thing, to send a message to their teacher, and then look in another venue to see if the teacher has answered. It would be one place where, say, content and questions and a chat from your classroom and the picture of your teacher to ring the phone on is all in one place. And so really easier to use for, say, especially ages 6 to 12, where trying to decipher and learn how to do email is not what we see as a developmentally appropriate activity for a 6 to 9-year-old. And so we are using these as guideposts. And then in addition, we had another option, and 75 of our 200 and some parents gave responses. And so specifically, we put those responses into buckets. And so what I see is that options for activities, so i.e. we give you some, say, inspiring content introduction, but then to give specific options for follow-up activities, additional contact, maybe availability between adults and students, and then accountability. And these were in the categories of accountability for students. So how can students know that they've been successful and were accountable for their responsibilities? That makes up like half the pie chart. So I see those as variants on these requests up on top too. But then I also see, more options for socialization, parent support, a clarified schedule. So those are things that we're focusing on as we go into the year. So I would say the experience when it was successful, we're trying to figure out what the characteristics of the successful parts of what we did in the spring were and really expand upon those. And we found that, wide open times with a lack of structure and unclearness about how to get a hold of an adult for help, that's what we're going to work to totally mitigate if we're successful. So that's what we're looking for. All right.
Okay.
So I see another question from Andrew P. What do you want to ask, Holly?
Yes, Andrew P. wants to thank you for answering the first question. And
Thank you for thanking me.
I have observed pre-COVID a culture of working while sick. For example, showing up no matter what. Could there be some messaging to get this off? Could parents take temperatures, be proactive every morning with kids?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll just, I just realized I'm a little bit in the shade, and I don't want to go all sort of Phantom of the Opera on you. So I'm just going to operate. Here we go. Thank you for asking. Yeah, the culture of working while your nose is running is something that has, I think, too long been condoned and or sort of quietly encouraged for teachers. And this year would be literally the opposite of that, and including for students. And so family members are going to be vital participants. And so I'm working with our school nurse and the Department of Health to really make a very clear what's expected from you at home visual. We have some of those graphics up on our return website, so greatriverschool.org/return. I'll see if I can pull a couple of those up. But we're giving very clear guidance to our staff that, just so you know what we're doing on the staff end before I get a little more into families in, to our staff that coming in while sick or even symptomatic is absolutely not okay this year. And so if we are learning in person in any way, we've got several plans in place on how to both cover learning areas or have staff call in and video lesson if there's expertise that only they have that they need to share with students. And so we're preparing to normalize and orient students that getting say a call in or a Zoom call in from your guide is one way we're going to be protecting each other if we're in that case. And so we're looking also to hire more additional people to be on site to serve as substitute teachers. so that we're prepared for that situation. So then at home, we do need you to be prepared to take temperatures often. There have been several, I think, very good articles summarizing some recent scientific study that by the time you do have a fever, you've been likely shedding the virus and contagious for at least 3 days. And so taking a temperature is really a mitigation step, is not a preventative measure, but we do still want you to be doing that. And then we're working with the Department of Health and our school nurses to also identify other early symptoms that you can use as a reliable basis on whether or not your student's ready to come into school if we're either hybrid or in-person learning. And so you as a family participant are going to be really essential to helping us stay safe. So we are also planning on at school to have many thermometers available to take temperatures. And then we're working on some health screening protocols that have been used in other countries and at other schools regionally and nationally, just to check in with students as they come in. And what we're doing is aiming to frame those questions around not just how do you feel, are you okay, but how do you feel, are you okay, in a way that you understand that question means I care to know that you're ready to learn here and that you're not, say, super concerned or stressed out about something else that's going on. And so it's a pretty hard time to be in society and not feel super stressed out or worried about what's going on. And so what we're doing is aiming to build that kind of check-in, both around physical illness and then around the social and emotional fortitude to deal with the stressors in a way that still allows us to enjoy being around each other. So, and that might be a little more than you were looking for, but we would be aiming to give you some language to use at home that mirrors that, so that we can all be hearing the same kind of language and having that signify the same kind of support for each other. All right.
Okay, we're halfway through.
Yeah, so we'll go through these next ones pretty quick.
Okay. Do you want me
I
to
see a question here. How about the in-person model? You want to ask me that one?
Yes, it's from Melissa.
Great.
In the in-person model, will students and staff be tested in any way in order to enter the building, like temperature tests?
So, et cetera. So Alyssa, that's a great question. I'm actually doing some sleuth work to really hammer down what the commitments the Department of Health and Education are making to making testing available. And so what we learned last week from the state on Thursday afternoon, on July 30th at 2 p.m., is that the state will be sending saliva tests for every educator in Minnesota to every school district. I'm calling to find out when those will arrive at our school. And then we are aiming to also put some protocols together so staff has some guidance on when to use that. I'm also looking for some answers on exactly when, where, and how tests would be available for our school members. However, at this point, I think in your question was implied, and I'll just read the language in it again so I make sure I get it correct. Good. Will they be tested in any way in order to enter the building? So what I can report, both from our operation currently of summer camp, and then my understanding of even in other places where outbreaks are currently happening, and so the rise means that tests are being really funneled to those medical facilities. There is not a protocol yet in Minnesota available where we can make sure everyone's tested and shows a clear test in order to return to school. And so what I'm looking for from the Department of Health and Education is some answers on if someone needs a test, where exactly should they go to get it? How can they make sure they won't be turned away? And then specifically, how can they not necessarily worry or have unclarity about who's paying for the test, how is it administered, and where do the results go? And so I don't have clear answers from the state yet on that. I do know that in some cases we're still getting very clear with which clinics will just test students immediately versus ask them to have symptoms before young children or elementary age students are tested. And so that's one of the things that I want to make sure is really clear for everyone involved before giving you information. But I have seen the perception that we have the ability to, say, acquire our own tests or administer them, and we don't yet have that. And so I just want to give you sort of the moment-to-moment update. But the moment we do have answers on that, we'll be putting that in an infographic and a very clear letter and communicating with you. I see a question here from Emily Bell, a new family at Great River School. Should I ask myself this one, Holly?
Please, please.
Okay, I will. Okay, great. So here we go. We're a new family this year at Great River, supporting a neurodiverse student, and our previous experience of distance learning at a different school last spring proved challenging. If Great River uses distance learning, are there options for adjusting assignments to minimize screen time needed? For example, could lessons be adapted to more hands-on rather than digital? So Emily, the short answer is yes, that's why I like working at Great River School. The longer answer is the older your student is, the more they're going to have to interact with the screen in some way in order to get started. The younger your student is, likely the way more flexible and way more able to even just be checking in, say, by phone if the screen isn't a way that they can check in with their teacher would work. We're also looking at ways, if we are doing distance learning, to really empower guides and families and students in a structured way to have physically distanced meetings so that there is some kind of physical and humane visible connection between a classroom community or a small group of students. And so the adjustment for you coming in as a new student likely would be that, yes, there's a lot of flexibility available, and please ask for and speak up for you if something is not working. So we want to be able to either provide accommodations or work with interventionists to design appropriate interventions so that the kinds of hands-on things that I think you're seeking and asking for are really clearly understood by the educators you're working with. And so again, if you're in an elementary classroom, that's going to be just one guide that you're working on adjusting expectations with. And in my experience as a parent of students who actually really struggled to engage with distance learning last spring was that the guides really made exceptional and effective adjustments to allow my students to feel like they had some ownership over their learning. And so we got to hear from you. So please don't pause to speak up. And if something's not going well in terms of responsiveness, please let me know.
Sam, I'd like to pull one in from the chat.
Please do, because I can't see the chat while I'm doing all this. That's great.
Okay, it's from Jessica. In the in-person model, how will work environments be conducted, considering the shared working materials and non-desk spaces?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of the questions we are working to, I guess, for lack of a better word, make super clear to everyone before we do an in-person model. So I can for sure tell you this. We're not starting the year all in person. And I can tell you this because we absolutely need time for everyone to be trained in on what to do when in order to keep the in-person model complying with any of the guidance from the CDC or MDH. So that's something I'm confident in letting you know. However, in order to get specific about how that happens, Jessica, everything from taking the prepared environment and taping out sectors so that you know where you're working and you don't accidentally sort of veer into someone else's space, to making sure it's really clear what and how to take care of yourself if your mask gets uncomfortable or you start getting a sneezing attack or something else happens, your nose starts running or you got a nosebleed. So all of those kinds of situations of sort of daily school mini crises, when you got a mask on and everyone wants to stay far apart, become sort of unrecognizable crises that we all got to train for before we encounter them. And so we are basically running through what happens if scenarios, and then if we don't have an answer for it, coming up with a protocol and then putting on a list of things that we got to orient people for. And so that goes also for how to exit and enter the building or exit and enter the rooms, or if and how you can get up and move around. So, one of the things that our classrooms have really prided themselves on and thrive on is that Montessori concept of freedom of movement. And so now the Montessori concept of grace and courtesy and respect for your community actually goes ahead now of freedom of movement. And so we've got a lot of little skills to learn, but without desks, like you said, and again, we almost never all face the same direction in one classroom. All of that means that we're just going to have to learn different new skills that are frankly environment specific. So in each classroom, depending on where the desks and walls and learning environment is, it's going to be a little bit different. But we'll have to space out our tables more, and in certain sectors, we'll have to say, have like assigned spots for Chowkies or work pads or you know, the kind of group work that used to happen will have to be more spread out across big tables. So yeah, you put your hand on a, you put your finger on a complex problem. Ting in Roseville says, I'm wondering if it'll be impossible to monitor illness spread during flu season, especially during the peak. Are you considering just doing online during the expected high flu season time? One thing I can say, Ting, is that if this illness gets harder to monitor because of flu season, that will not just affect us, but everybody. And so St. Paul Public Schools, you know, all of the metro schools will be affected by that. And so, so yes, I am anticipating that flu season will be a confusing time and possibly scary time for a lot of folks, because there'll be so many more symptomatic people who will want tests that we really have to have a testing protocol and process together that is safe to go in and secure to go in and get a quick test, so you know that you have the flu, not COVID-19. That's not our role in society or our job as a school. And so I am, like many parents, anticipating that this winter could be a time in which distance learning is likely to happen. So again, like I said, I know we're not starting the year in person. I know at some point this year we will have at least a few weeks in a row of distance learning. And so, you know, over the next month, if numbers in all the metro counties really dropped, that's why we're going to go more in person. But I expect that winter will be a confusing time. And so we will see how our society deals with it. But we've got to have a contact tracing and testing program really available so that, you know, you and me, Ting, can figure out if we got the flu or if we don't. So I agree. Dinner is ready. Oh, I just really like how you all, as respectful participants, tell me when you're leaving. So Holly and I thank you for that.
Yes, thanks.
We'll hold your last question over till Thursday. That sounds great, Andrew. Thank you. Anything else in the chat that I should get to before I answer these last few?
The other ones in the chat are all from me to get us started. So
yeah,
they're important, but you don't have to answer them. These are more important.
Okay, great. Is it possible for families that opt for distance learning to work closely with the school to create Montessori environments in our homes? Absolutely, Alyssa. Yes. And I don't know if you're asking this, Alyssa, because you got a lot of people and maybe you're just signed in, you know, as one name, not the whole family. But specifically, yes. At frankly every age of student we have at Great River School, there are ways for you to take, say, corners or sections of rooms, or, you know, frankly, what I did last year, we like moved some furniture around and made a little learning area, and you can prepare that the way a classroom might be prepared. So, you know, you can use shelves you have at home. You can also, frankly, you can use things you have lying around to put cardboard or boards across and make a shelf, and then you can place items in there in a beautiful way. And so we do have some tips on that. And last year for elementary students, we sent home some printed materials. But if you're a family that's going to opt for distance learning for the year and you know that, then we will be working with you over the first, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks of school to slowly build up that learning environment at home so that it works best for you. And so an older student, it might actually look like you have a clean space. You have places where papers can always go away rather than stay out. You've got, you know, your little carafe of tape and colored pencils and markers and highlighters and pens ready. And then I would encourage anyone who does have a functioning, say, a library by mail system or a functioning library in their area to just prepare as an adolescent student to be looking for the kinds of source materials, if you know you're going to stay home all year, that we use at school, and or familiarize yourself with materials such as a lot of the museums in Washington, D.C. and a lot of the museums along the National Gallery have the kind of primary source materials, whether it's the Museum of African American History or the Smithsonian or the Library of Congress. So those are the places you'll be doing a lot of your research if you're an adolescent. Whew, I got into that one. Okay. Eric asks, we might have missed this, but given the responses you shared that some faculty wouldn't or couldn't return during the pandemic, regardless of the school's choice, does that mean some elementary classrooms would be virtual through the pandemic? That's an excellent question, Eric. And the short answer is no, at no point would an elementary classroom go virtual for the whole pandemic. And in specific, we're committed to keeping all of our teachers employed, even if they are not able to physically come in. And so without going too deep into the details of that, I believe every elementary classroom will have a already known adult, and or if an elementary classroom is getting a new teacher anyway, that new teacher is also planning to be in physically. There are a few, say, adolescent courses that will likely be taught virtually all year, but those adolescents have multiple guides. And so in that case, we're working on ways in which that can be successful. But in the elementary program, no, the elementary program, if and when we are hybrid or in person, we'll have adults on site for sure to be facilitating the kind of hands-on material manipulation that is so important to the elementary classroom. All right, Eric in Roseville says, has the school or the teachers considered how to use the pandemic as a learning vehicle, i.e. reality as a means to learn, science, art, lit, statistics, medicine, history, et al.? Yes, in fact, I know of lessons, Eric, that happened even just this past spring that focused on social choices folks made during the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. I also know situations in which the data that was collected and made available by the CDC and some reported in the New York Times has been part of the design for classes this coming fall in civics and government and in social studies. And I do also believe that the way, say, our global politics class functions, or the way that upper elementary students study biology are all subject area focused on, how are nations or governments responding to this in different ways and preparing those things, or, what is a coronavirus? Because we've had coronaviruses for a long time, usually as the flu or other respiratory illnesses. And so we know a lot about how this new one is likely to act. So I already see, both science and social studies, but also math teachers using statistics like that to inform our learning. Alyssa, if we have to choose distance learning, what would we use, Google Classroom or PowerSchool? In fact, there are several other options also. And what we're looking for is one option that allows a classroom community to build a contained, secure, and easy to use platform where you just need one password for all the information. And so we've been researching a couple options, and we will likely be ready to share those with you for sure before school starts, but pretty soon. So it won't be a one or the other kind of thing. We're looking for one of those existing systems that may not be either Google Classroom or PowerSchool to be an easy to use single stop shop that you can basically also click a button and either get a response from or understand where to find a teacher for help. Ting in Roseville says, are most of the teachers and staff planning to return this year, or have a certain percentage decided to leave? Oh, and thank you to all the teachers and staff for all you have done and will do, by the way. Thank you, Ting. That is a thoughtful question, and specifically, we don't have any staff who have left because of the pandemic or coronavirus. We have several guides who were planning to transition. Either they moved away, so moved to Duluth, or moved far, far away. And so those folks we knew were departing. In terms of percentages, we were a little above average in terms of how many people stayed from last year to this year. So in terms of our licensed guides, I believe that we are just over 90%. And in terms of all staff, I think we're still over 85% in terms of returning staff. And so we also have new staff, though, that are starting this year, and we're answering the same question for them. I think Emily Bell might have been here as a new family coming. Just like new families are coming and new students are coming and wondering how we're going to get to know this school if we're possibly distance learning a lot, we're thinking the same thing for staff. So we're planning already as to how in-service works for welcoming new staff and orienting them if, this 15-inch monitor is how they're doing it. So I started screen sharing, so forgive me if my face has been small, but what I wanted to show is that one thing that we already have up here on our greatriverschool.org/return site is two things. One, how can we help at home? So we have some sections here of how to help. We have a mask making campaign, and our goal is to make 2,100 masks. And the goal is that 300 small, 800 medium, and 1,000 large masks are made. So we fixed this link recently. You can sign up here and know how many you're going to bring in. You drop them off right at school between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. If that doesn't work for you, one parent, Jenny Bowling, has volunteered to coordinate how that's going to work to pick them up. And then We have used some CDC information and borrowed some visuals to also just be very, very clear about what we need you to do from home. So you need to let us know how it's going, both health-wise and education-wise at your house. We're going to be washing hands just frankly more than you've ever imagined. And we will be practicing physical distancing at school, so 6 feet away. We'll also be wearing a mask all the time. So all ages, all students, all staff will be wearing masks all day. We want you to stay home when you're sick. We want you to stay connected with us. And so that staying connected could look like having a face-to-screen face conversation. It could also look like a phone call. It could also look, frankly, just like up here where we said feedback. We just really got to know what's going on for you in order to do our job well. And then I will say, sometimes the best way to stay connected is to write a snail mail letter by hand and then mail it. And then I receive it and I let it sit in the sun for a while and then I open it up. And then let's focus on mental and emotional health. And this is one thing I said last week that I think I could emphasize just in our closing times here. But the concern that I recommend we have as adults for this time is that we are able to role model what it's like to be able to have, say, sorrow and grief for what's going on that's hard without making it a personal grievance that somehow our life is worse off or this isn't worth doing as much as when we're not having a pandemic. So that might sound a little vague or a little oblique, and I suppose what I mean is it's really important that we identify that a childhood or teenagedom that's happening right now is not, frankly, lower in quality, like a customer service experience, than a teenagedom that happened, 20 years ago without pandemic. Like, we live in the times we live in. And so I would encourage and ask all the adults who are adulting right now, who hopefully that's everybody who's eligible for adulthood, to be able to engage with a young person and really look at the world that we're living in right now as not having happened during any of our lifetimes, and therefore requiring a kind of response to the world that is new and challenging, and asks, I think, of our young people to really focus on how to make the world a place worth living in right now, even with the kinds of restrictions we have. And so that kind of focus on mental and emotional health, though, means please talk about your concerns and fears. As an adult, be available and contact us if you need to be connected with resources. But our 4 school social workers are really working hard to make sure they're available when needed. And then all of our staff are also prepared for, I would say, more astute, centered, and acute methods of social emotional learning, which means they're going to really be paying attention as a whole staff in our thinking about curriculum and our thinking about our programs, is how we can make sure that students are able to say what they need when they need it. So, academically, that looks like knowing how to ask for help and then speaking up and not feeling like you have to keep something a secret if something's not clear. And then, socially and emotionally, a lot of the things that get in the way of asking for help are skills we're going to work on for the first probably 6 weeks of school. So we have put a lot of, information here of how to help at home. Again, that's at the Return website. And then down underneath, we remind you of these forums. We've actually started to take each previous forum and then link it down here. So you can see the last 2. I'm in a different venue now, you can see. And so we'll just make a request if you want to see a different venue next time. Any last questions, Holly?
Yes. If the Department of Health told us to shut down, would childcare still be available for essential workers?
Oh, that really depends on what the Department of Health says. So I can say that, yes, generally childcare is going to be available for essential workers all year. The only time that we would have to pause on offering that care and supervision of children at school is if the Department of Health identifies our site as a place in which either more than 5 non-connected cases occurred, so 5 cases where the people did not interact with each other, and or if a certain percentage of our population, and I believe it's 10%, but I will look it up for the next answer too. If more than 10% of our population was infected, they would ask us to pause everything, and they would come in and actually help us test everyone in the community to try to identify and contact trace why that was happening. However, that's not something that's happened often at other school sites in the region. And so typically what would happen is If the Department of Health started consulting with us, they would really be helping with contact tracing. And because this is not a shows up immediately, you get a test and you know you have it kind of illness or disease, what would happen is we would find out that someone in our community has tested positively. That very same minute, we'd be on the phone with the Department of Health. It's taken anywhere from 3 to 8 minutes for them to connect us with their experts. And then they would have a protocol, either you know, in the same few hours, we would contact trace and find out if anyone else is symptomatic. Then they would be able to provide us with a place to go get quick tests. And usually it takes them somewhere between 6 and 12 hours to recommend to us who to keep home and how many. So it's been surprising to me at how, frankly, surgical their recommendations are in terms of closing down a school. So I'll prepare you all now to find out that, you know, if a first grade student or a 12th grade student or a teacher had a positive test, that doesn't mean the whole thing would shut down for everybody all the time. It does mean within 12 hours, we would make the most conservative decision and then slowly step back into a model that's helped everyone stay safe. But providing care in the building for everyone likely is something that can even still happen the next day, even if positive cases show up, because we do have a cleaning crew that comes in, we do have disinfectants, and we would have the rest of the building empty in that case. And so that's probably something you can count on. Holly, yes?
Another question. Let's see. How will families let you know if they need technical assistance, like computers at home for each student, if we start online like St. Paul schools?
Oh yeah, so there's somebody who knew that St. Paul School said that. We for sure will be sending out a survey, likely very soon, that asks for you to let us know really what the commitment that yes, you need help with internet access at home, and or yes, you need a device. This year, we likely want to recommend that every student in the household has their own device so that there aren't students waiting to connect with adults. So just to know, if you're a family who didn't need one in the spring because you've got one computer that works well and you've got 3 kids, you might be a family who needs a device this year. And then when we send that survey out, we're going to give a deadline and really need you to tell all of your friends who also go to Great River School to fill it out, because we want, frankly, all the responses, not just most. So we would want to know that. And then for childcare, we want to know the same thing. So keep in mind, we'll ask you what days you might need care. And then childcare, we'll have more details on next week, but before 9 a.m. and after 2 p.m., those are times that's before and after care. We ask for families to pay for those. If you can't pay for those that need care and you fall into the category of either you're an essential worker and or you have a family that qualifies for free and reduced lunch status, and or you're a family who needs care and supervision, otherwise your home stability or your employment might be threatened. Any of those 3 categories of family, you can also apply for before and after care, but between 9 and 2, that care and supervision throughout the year in any model is no charge to students, but we still need you to be ready to RSVP for that, so we're prepared for you. Yes?
Yeah, 2 more quick questions. For new
Oh, great.
families, when is the deadline for notification if they will be joining us or not?
Oh, we want to know that, well, you've probably heard either from CIT Krieger or Karen Anway. We would like to know that. You made which one up?
I made that question up.
Oh, you did. You will have heard from someone, hopefully, but you will want to, because everybody who's coming through has heard from either Stacey or Karen, but you will want to make that decision like yesterday, because we want to know that you're coming and prepare for you. And then we also want to make sure that if you're not coming, we can prepare another family. So if you're really on the fence, I would ask you to choose a date in the next, say, 5 calendar days, and really just make a decision by sometime. Set yourself a deadline and make a decision. Now, if you don't have the information you need, let us know and we'll give it to you. But we need to know from you so that we can prepare best. We have found that when we let families wait and wait and wait, we have a lot of decisions made, say on August 30th, that doesn't give other people, or say September 6th, that doesn't give other people time to make an informed decision, and then everybody's missing out. So you've been hankering back and forth all of August, and then other people need to do some hankering too. So do what you can and please decide. If you need a date from me, by the 7th. Oh.
One more question in the last minute that we have. For all families, should they plan to join in for all of your Tuesday, Thursday meetings in August at 6 p.m.?
Oh, well, we're doing this really to answer directly, and we'll see who is brave enough or reckless enough to volunteer to speak a question aloud to me. But I would encourage families to join, because you might hear the same thing in a different way, or you might identify that there's something you thought you understood and you could explain it to a neighbor, or you might actually, a question might occur to you. So this would be one of the community building venues. I think that, tonight is probably the smallest group we've had. A week ago, we had, I think, close to 85 people at one time. So my guess is there'll be more people attending as we make some announcements these next couple weeks. But yeah, this is where we can get pretty detailed, and we could actually have a dialogue. So I'd encourage everyone to attend. And, give me some critical feedback. We could go faster with answers. I could use puppetry. Well, I'm just kidding. I could, but we'll see. Okay, thanks everybody for attending, and take care. Bye.
Bye.